Hey, it's great to be here this morning, and this issue is one that has been just incredible to have the chance to work on and to watch. And y'all know in Washington, you don't see issues evolve very quickly very often, but this one is one that has really been moving very, very quickly. Years ago, I remember working on this, and it was one of these issues that you would bring up, like the other very controversial topics, like maybe the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or pro-life, pro-choice issues, those things that are just immediately polarizing, and there's very little middle ground. And over the last few years, as a result of a lot of efforts, and certainly much attributable to what John's been doing, we've seen a bit of a shift. And for me personally, I worked on coastal issues in Louisiana. I rebuilt the levees after Hurricane Katrina and restored some of the coastal wetlands down there that were impacted. And we measured sea rise. We measured it. It was a kind of a black and white thing. And so it's an issue that I've witnessed, I've observed, and when we were putting together our $50 billion coastal plan, we had to take every consideration into account. And that meant what were hurricanes going to do, it meant what was sea rise going to do, what was subsidence and other factors going to do, to where we could truly represent the best recommendations to the public and to the legislature. And so we had to bring it into account. And as soon as we kind of stepped out and began talking about this, we got beat up a good bit, but the science was there. And in this case, I think that we're moving in a direction that makes sense. I think that moving in a direction of reducing emissions, moving in a direction of clean energy, it makes sense. But the science also indicates that this is a global issue. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize sort of the background of this issue. And the reality is that over the last about 17 years, the United States has led the world in reducing emissions. Right? We've led the world in reducing emissions. And so one of the things that John and I have really, in fact, a couple of folks from across the ponds here, my wife is Dutch, is that we've reduced emissions more than the next 12 emissions reducing countries combined. And so when we're talking to Republicans, it's not that we're going in and saying, hey, we're asking you to do a 180. So we're asking you to look carefully at the things that have worked in the United States in terms of us reducing emissions, us improving conservation and efficiency, but doing it in a way that doesn't disrupt the economy. And I'm going to be a little partisan right now, and that as I think Republican positions have been refined or recalibrated of this, I think that many on the far left have gone really, really far left. And now, I've referred to it as a religion, and somebody the other day, the Church of Climatology. The position of some is no longer grounded in science or reality. It's not. It is. The target has not become how can we move in a direction of reducing emissions. It's a direction of how can we kill the domestic oil and gas industry. And so let me just be really clear. I think moving forward, there's a great conservative message here. One is that investing proactively in resilience makes all the financial sense in the world. I come from South Louisiana, where we just had Hurricane Ida, 194 mile per hour winds for this hurricane. I can show you over and over and over again how these investments in resiliency pay for themselves. Ecological resilience, community resilience. Number two, you remember when President Trump was here, some of the top items that he worked on was reducing the tax load to help make the U.S. economy more competitive. He talked about helping to reduce the regulatory burden, just to modernize regulations and to help improve regulatory efficiency. And secondly, you can take some of the things that we're doing. Oh, on trade, he said, hey, look, I want to make sure we have free and fair trade. All right. Now look at what we're talking about doing, or we're progressing right now in regard to climate. We're talking about solutions that help to reduce energy consumption. When you reduce energy consumption, that's compatible with helping to improve efficiency, right? It is. And so we're continuing to make investments through some of our extraordinary research and development efforts, which are the most substantial in the world in the United States. We're continuing to progress efforts to improve energy efficiency and conservation. It reduces emissions, it reduces consumption, it reduces the cost of building a widget in the United States. That's good for us. That's good for us to do. So second, that's the second one, the conservation, the efficiency piece. But I think it's really important that as we continue, I'm going to emphasize this, as we continue to talk to conservatives, talk to Republicans about this, it's not that we're doing a 180. It's that we're trying to double and triple down on the very strategies that work. Third thing is that we've got to make sure that our strategy, that it's based on U.S. resources. We've got to have a few principles here. We've got to make sure the sources or solutions are abundant. We've got to make sure they're affordable. We've got to make sure they're exportable. There's projected to be a 50% increase in global demand for energy over the next 29 years. There's projected to be a 40% increase in natural gas demand over the next 29 years. You have countries around the world, I mean, look at the African continent, that effectively aren't even using power in some countries. You're going to see an extraordinary surge in demand. Are you going to tell me that you're going to be able to go to these places and say, hey, yeah, we're going to throw up a windmill and we're going to put this battery here and it's going to cost you 10 times as much as some of these other applications, but this is what we're going to do. It's never going to take. And so when I talk about things that are affordable and exportable and abundantly available, we've got to think about how we do this from a U.S. lens. What are the resources that we can use that are U.S. based? Think of the United States as a company, your company, and you're the CEO, you're the board of directors. How do we design a strategy? When you think about November of last year, the United States was entirely energy independent. How do we design a strategy that meets our clean energy objectives for the future, but also recognizes this surge in demand? We're exporting gas, LNG, out of Louisiana to 36 countries around the world today, and we're energy independent. We can't trade that off and suddenly continue down this path, or go down this path where we're going to be playing to the hands of China that makes 90% of the solar panels, that have the market cornered on rare earth and strategic minerals. We've got to have a U.S.-based strategy, because if we don't, we're going to be trading slave labor, child labor, worse environmental implications for mining and other things than we would if we continue pursuing the objectives we can. So I think that things like carbon capture and storage are going to continue to play a huge role for our energy future in the United States and our ability to export our clean energy solutions. We've got to be agnostic in terms of technology and stay focused on some of the solutions like nuclear, like natural gas that have helped us to achieve some of the lowest reductions in the world. And we've got to continue working and refining some renewable energy technologies. They're going to allow us to improve the functionality of some of the technologies like solar, wind, hydro, and others. I'm up against time, so I'm going to stop there and just wait for y'all's Q&A.
How many of you could listen to Garret all morning? Can I just turn my microphone off? Let me try very carefully to add some value to that conversation. Today, if things go as planned, nothing will go as planned, but just if things go as planned, the House will vote down the bipartisan infrastructure package. 40 or more liberal Democrats will vote against that. At the urging, I read this morning of Bernie Sanders, he said voted down. And my point is that frequently here in Washington, we do things that just don't make any sense. It's a shocker, right? And so when I arrived in Washington 4 years ago, I found a landscape where Republicans who care deeply about this planet, who want to be amazing stewards over this planet, who want to do the right thing, we're all kind of lining up saying this climate change is malarkey, right? And for their part, Democrats were all lining up and saying the Earth's going to blow up in 7 years, right? We must stop all airline travel. We have to stop eating beef, right? And no wonder Republicans are saying, right, this is malarkey and crazy. I came into that environment with this feeling and this passion that I should be a good steward over this earth, and I found myself with no home, right, to express that. Thank goodness I came across people like Garret and others who were this little light right out there, and I began what I call a 4-year journey to get to where I am today. I am a Republican who 4 years ago stood up in my town hall meetings, and like almost all of my colleagues, when asked if the climate was changing and if man was influencing it, I looked at my shoes and I said, I had a list of answers that were brilliant or intelligent and totally dodged the question, right? And what happened after I dodged the question, all the audience heard after that was blah, 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 right? It didn't matter that we had good solutions. It didn't matter that we had good ideas, because this has become a litmus test, right? And if you fail the litmus test, you have no credibility. So with my team, we really set out to try to figure this out. And what was enlightening and so gratifying to me along this path, along this journey, was the realization that you did not have to leave your conservative credentials at the door to play a role in this, and a significant role in making a difference in our climate. And I'm not sure all my colleagues have discovered that, right? This analogy I use, you'll forgive me if I make you uncomfortable, is if this was a discussion about immigration, and we had a lot of my left-leaning friends in here, and I said to them, the wall. And I said, I will not have a conversation with you about immigration unless you acknowledge that a wall, a physical border, helps in our immigration policy, right? They're all just like, their chests are tightening up, right? They're starting to break out into sweat. And this word, the wall, has so much built into it beyond a physical wall. And for Republicans, the word climate is much the same way, right? Wrapped into the word climate is the Green New Deal, no airplane travel, and all of the absurdities, right, that we hear in our heads. So Republicans tend to run from that. So with a lot of help from Garret and others, we started an effort to bring Republicans together to talk about the climate and to get our climate feet underneath us. And we call that the Conservative Climate Caucus. And the name was, we spent hours on the name. Why is the name important? Because if we don't have the word climate in it, all people will hear is blah, 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 right? We have other caucuses as Republicans that show that we're good stewards, but they don't have the word climate in it, and so it has no credibility. If we don't have the word conservative in it, then we fall suspect to some of the crazy ideas that are out there. So we formed the Conservative Climate Caucus, and we decided to launch it, and had lots of help, and Garret, thank you for your help, and many others. And I remember flying to Washington, D.C. the day before we were going to announce it, and my staff said, I think we have 30 members. I think 30 members have signed up for this. Now remember, the very first tenet of the caucus is the climate's changing, and decades of the Industrial Revolution has had an impact on it. Man's had an impact on it. We launched that caucus, I don't know, with 50 plus members, and within a few days it had 70 members. With almost no recruitment on our part. 70 Republican members who stood up and said, I am tired of being branded as not caring about this earth. I'm tired of being branded as denying the science. And that's what's happened as a result of us not liking this conversation. We get branded as not caring. We get branded as denying the science. My experience is, with the exception of a very small number of our colleagues, that is absolutely not true. Raise your hand if you don't want to leave this earth better than we found it. Right? Republicans are the traditional protectors of this earth. If I say the word EPA, it freaks a lot of my Republican colleagues out, but it was Richard Nixon, right, who established the EPA, clean air, clean water, right? All Republicans set in sight public plans. Republicans have their names on all of this. And yet, because of the dialogue, we've allowed ourselves to be branded as not caring, which is just simply not true. So today, the Conservative Climate Caucus has over 70 members, a third of all the House Republicans. And our mission is to educate Republicans. I know I will be successful when these 70 Republicans, every single one of them, can stand up in the town hall meeting and say, of course the climate's changing, of course man's had some influence on it. Let me tell you what I'm doing about it. Quick. Now, Garret is humble, but he has the harder job. He leads the Select Task Force. And his job is to put meat on the bones, more specifically, right, of where we sell this ship. My job is to educate Republicans and get them ready for that meat on the bones. And I think we both have our challenges, but I think he's actually got a little bit harder job. But it's a delight to be here with you and answer any questions you have. And Garret, should we jump into questions?
Gentlemen, thank you. The greatest statistic that you had in there, I don't know how many of you have been around your Democratic friends and say, you know, you Republicans just don't care. 70 members. I love that number. Alex, you did such a great job with your intro. You have the very first question.
What do you think about climate and the 2022 elections? How high a profile do you think it will have? And do you think Republicans will talk about it differently by 2022, and will it affect election outcomes and maybe control the House? I mean, all the big questions.
I represent, I think Alex mentioned, the youngest district in the country. And I can tell you, in my district, I see in the eyes of the young Republicans the disappointment. Right? I can see that for many of them, they're single issue voters. Now, how much will it impact 2020? Many of these young people don't vote, even though they're of age, they don't vote. There's a lot of confusion about the issue. I think it's probably region by region where it matters. I can tell you this, I'm in a very, very conservative district. It's an R+26. It probably won't determine the outcome of my election today. I think it will in several cycles. But I think there's districts around the country that are much closer. And I would not want to be a Republican out there in one of those tough districts without my climate feet underneath me, without a message, without a plan, right? Without a way to talk about it.
Just trying to find a statistic. Alex, to answer your question, as I look through this, let's make fun of this stat. I think that it depends on the district. Interesting story. So last year, before the elections, we had a meeting, and this was before COVID really hit, and we were sitting around talking. We had a pollster in there and talking through issues and everything, and we were going through some of the top issues that were out there. And with Republicans last year and the polling that I'm seeing this year, it's not a top 5. Is it a top 10, top 12? Yes. Not a top 5. Democrats it is. But interestingly, and y'all in this room know this, look, the people who make the majority are the purple people. Those are the people who make the majority. And the purple people care about this. They do. So in the hard red districts, is this going to be a moving issue? I don't know that it is. In those independent districts, nationally, it is going to be an issue. And it particularly is an issue in areas where you had younger voters. But let me throw out a stat here. I'm going to brag on my buddy. You have, they used President Trump in the last election as a baseline, just looking around the country, how different folks performed. This guy sitting next to me was the 3rd best performer in terms of using Trump as a baseline. He outperformed Trump by 17 points in Utah, by 17 points. 3rd best performance in America, which is really amazing. And I'm going campaign against them because we outperformed by 16 points.
Wasn't that the margin of victory for Republicans last night?
Just to be really clear, he mentioned youngest district in America, so these people are unencumbered by experience. And so, but Alex, here's my point. Though my point is that depending on the demographics, depending on your district, this is an issue that it may not be worth 10 points, but it may be worth enough to actually change the outcome of elections. I mean, just looking forward, and I know all of you start, how's this going to evolve? How's it going to play out? I don't see any scenario where this issue doesn't continue to raise in profile and importance and urgency. John talked about how this is really an issue that resonates with young people. I don't think it's going away. I think as they age, I think it's going to continue to be an issue. Now, where we're going to start running into problems is when the solutions start becoming unaffordable. And that's where things, I think, are going to start going off the rails. And I think it's really important, as we continue to discuss this, we keep the global framework in mind. And as we sit here and keep throwing out stats, while the United States has led the world reducing emissions, for every 1 ton of emissions we've reduced, China's increased by 4. That's wrong direction. China today, who's releasing more than every developed country in the world combined, has increased by 4. And under Paris Accords, they're going to increase another 50% between now and 2030. And this is wrong direction globally.